welcome to the BCS Service Management and IT Asset Management webinar for February. This is actually the first one we've done in 2025. We are a volunteer run group, and we are actually interested in hearing from new potential committee members who want to join in and help us organise events like this. We have webinars, we have hybrid events, and we also run events up in London, especially our October a conference that we run every year. It's a very popular event. That is a ticketed event, but we do provide plenty of food from breakfast through till supper, and something to drink afterwards. It's a great networking opportunity, and it's also a great way of getting your finger on the pulse of what's going on, both in service management and in IT asset management. We've got a stream for each, and so there's plenty for all. And actually, in our IT asset management back in October, Rich did present to us on the topic of Microsoft licensing. So some of you may have seen that, but there's been some changes since then. So Rich is going to catch us up to date. I will also say welcome to Rich as a new member of our committee. He has kindly stepped forward and volunteered to help us in our arranging of events. So hopefully we'll be able to use your knowledge, use your network and your reach to be able to find more people who we can get to explain wonderful things to us. So Rich is about to tell us about Microsoft licensing. It's something that he's been working for 20 years in software licensing on the whole. He's had many different kinds of role, but recently he joined Syniega, and he's their head of Microsoft Intelligence, as well as the renowned owner of wearer of shirts. So I'll hand over to Rich to introduce yourself a little bit more.
Awesome. Thank you very much. And yeah, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us. So as Art says, I'm Rich Gibbons. I think many of us looking at the names will be connected on LinkedIn already. If not, feel free to search me up. Yeah, I've been doing Microsoft licensing for about 20 years. So I was about 4 or 5 when I started. And for some reason, I really enjoy it, and you know, the more it changes, the more it stays the same in terms of it being something that we all need to focus on. So I'm always available to talk Microsoft, but this I've condensed down lots of the learnings, the things that we do at Syniega, put it into a kind of 45-minute presentation, and it's very much a the high level overview, but hopefully it will be interesting and useful. And as with any session that I do, I've got my slides, I've got plenty to say, but questions, thoughts, opinions, etc., more than welcome. So do put anything in the chat. If you've got a specific question, something you want me to repeat, go over in more detail, etc., and I will be more than happy to. So yeah, I think on that note, we will probably be about time to jump into the content. So
Thanks, Rich.
mastering Microsoft in 2025. It's a tall order for one session to master the entire thing, but we can make a start. And what I've done is I've broken it down into a few different sections. So pricing, licensing, and strategy, and then some ideas of next steps. You will all know, if you're here, you work with Microsoft to some degree, you will know that it's complex, they keep changing things. And one of the problems is for some of you, you work with Microsoft and then maybe you don't have the pleasure for 2 or 3 years. And by the time you come back to it for your next renewal, it's almost like starting again each time. So what I'm trying to do here, give you some insights, give you some starting points for your next renewal, which will help you identify where you need to go, and of course, take it forwards. So starting with the pricing side of things, Microsoft for the last few years have been on a run of price increases. They've not all been as well publicized as others, and because their portfolio is so broad, it can be difficult to keep track of it all, particularly for people such as yourselves who have what I would call like a proper job, where you can't spend all your time looking at what Microsoft are doing. It can be very difficult to keep up to date. So, as an overview, and this is really, for those of you coming up to renewal of a multi-year agreement, these are things that have happened since you last signed. So, back in March 2022, which seems forever ago now, there were a couple of price increases on the CSP side. So when they introduced the new NCE version of CSP, 20% increase on certain licenses, and some of the Office 365 and Microsoft 365 SKUs went up by 25% for E1. So that came March 22. Then in November that year, they released SQL Server 2022, which had a 10% price increase that kicked in from January 23 onwards. So if you're a SQL user and you are coming up to renewal, even if your SQL hasn't changed at all, it will be 10% more expensive just because there's a new version out. Hot on the heels of that, April 2023 was the first iteration of Microsoft's price harmonization program. It's a lovely sounding name, harmony can never be a bad thing. But what Microsoft mean is they have the dollar price. They keep an eye now on where other currencies have moved too far away from that dollar bar. So April 2023, GBP went up by 9%. Euro, Norwegian, and Danish kroner up 11%, and Swedish krona went up 15% for cloud products as they got re-leveled up to that dollar bar. Then later that year, they did a 9% increase in Australia. I don't know that we've got any Australians because it's about somewhere between 1:30 and 4:30 in the morning, I think. If we do have any Australians, fair play. But across the globe, so Europe across to Australia, price increases in 2023. Then last year, October 24, Dynamics 365 went up by between 9 and 17%, depending on which product. And that was the first price increase that Microsoft had done specifically for Dynamics. And you'll notice that everything is the first price increase one way or another when they announce it. So October 24, Dynamics price increase. Then the month after, they announced Windows Server 2025 and System Center 2025. So those bring with them a 10% increase as well. So just like the SQL release, your Windows Server on your agreement, 10% more, even if you haven't added a single core or a single user. So if you have SQL and Windows and Dynamics, these price increases start to layer up. Now, this month, slightly surprisingly, saw a 5% decrease for GBP. This was due to the price harmonization. So for many SKUs, 5% decrease across the cloud products. However, you have to think to yourself, well, it went up 9% in April, and then Dynamics 365 went up another 9%. So that 5% decrease, you're still, paying more than you were on your last contract. And if we've got any Brazilians online or anyone who has a Brazilian branch, 12% increase in Brazilian real. So that takes us up to the current day. Microsoft have already announced that from April 1st, there will be a range of other price increases. I don't know why they insist on doing things on April Fool's Day. It always seems odd, but maybe that says something. So in April, we're going to see a 5% increase for any pay monthly SKU. So if you're buying products on CSP and you're paying monthly, or you're buying things direct through Microsoft, you will see that increase. Power BI is going to go up by 40%. So Power BI Pro will increase 40% and Power BI Premium slightly less. And there will also be increase in pricing for Teams Phone. So looking at those three things, sorry, in particular, pay monthly SKUs. So if you're buying any of these products and paying for them on a monthly basis, you will see that increase. You'll notice it doesn't cover things through the Azure side. So reserved instances, savings plans, Azure Marketplace, they're not impacted. But then Power BI. So Power BI Pro is currently $9.99, and this is dollars because that's Microsoft's kind of standard currency. That's going up from effectively $10 to $14. And then Power BI Premium per user is going up from 20 to 24. Microsoft also keen to point out that this is the first Power BI specific price increase that they've done, which is true, but of course those previous price increases impact it as well. And then Teams Phone. So any of you using the telephony capabilities of Microsoft 365, you will see increase Teams Phone Standard, 25% increase from $8 to $10. Frontline, 20% increase, sorry, 25% increase from $4 to $5. And then increases across the calling plans as well. So if you're using them for the actual kind of phone credits, as it were, that's going up as well. So I don't know, for those of you, so I've just seen a comment. What's the good news? I think there's some in here. We'll find out. Let me know at the end. So yeah. So if you're, an IT asset manager, software asset manager, it may be that you need to work with your telephony team to fully explore the impact on the Teams phone side, to really understand who's using what where. But this is coming from April, so telephony is going up, data analytics is going up, Windows Server and System Center have already gone up. Dynamics went up less than 6 months ago. So when you get to your renewal, like I say, in a scenario where you've not increased at all, you've just stayed the same, you're looking at, double-digit increase in pricing. We've spoken to various customers that are seeing that kind of increase in the initial pricing from Microsoft. So be aware that these things have happened, and this will also impact discounts that you negotiate. So, let's say with some of this, let's say you negotiated a 20% discount on Dynamics 365. You come around to renewal, Microsoft say, yep, we'll keep that, no problem, 20% discount. However, because it's gone up by 10, 12%, in real terms, that discount is much lower than it previously was. So working with your procurement and negotiation teams to let them model the impact of this on your future strategy, absolutely key. And what you will also find is there has been no change in the pricing of the E5 bundle. So Power BI Pro is part of E5, Teams Calling part of E5. They haven't gone up when they're part of the bundle. So what you'll find, E5, the most expensive bundle on offer. Some organizations will look at it and say, right, we're going to buy a lower bundle and then we'll buy some individual products. Microsoft are working to make that gap smaller, so it's more likely that a customer will say, do you know what? It's only an extra, £3.20 or what have you per user. We'll just get E5 because that is big focus. The Microsofters will look at as we go through. They call out in the earnings every quarter number of E5 or percentage of E5 users, and it drives what they call ARPU, the average revenue per user, always driven quite heavily by E5 adoption. So they're wanting organizations to move to E5, so they're trying to reduce that price difference and make it look more cost effective, really. So there are other movements on price. Those are the big ones. If you signed your contract, kind of 2022 onwards, there's been SQL increases, Windows Server, System Center, Dynamics, and then we've got Power BI and Teams coming up as well. So lots of different price increases. I admit it's probably not the most cheerful start to a session on a Tuesday evening. But forewarned is forearmed. If you know that these price increases are coming, it perhaps puts even greater focus on license optimization, software asset management. So within a business, if they're kind of like, well, this asset management lark, what do we need it for? Sitting down and saying, well, we're going to be paying an extra £450,000 or whatever it might be if we don't optimize, will hopefully drive some focus onto what we do. So that's the pricing side of things. Coupled with that, it's then looking at the licensing side. And I tell this story all the time, but it must be 10 or 11 years ago now. Microsoft started what they were calling the licensing simplification process, and it was all going to get much easier. It has only got more complicated since then. And we'll look at some of the changes as we go through. But probably one of the big things has been around enterprise agreements. And some of you will probably have seen this. Those of you that are on LinkedIn for any length of time really will have seen a variety of posts about this. And that there's been a little bit of exaggeration, shall we say. So to paraphrase Monty Python, enterprise agreements are no more. They have ceased to be. They're bereft of life. Rest in peace. They're an ex-agreement. That's what a lot of the internet has been saying about enterprise agreements. It's not quite as drastic as that, though. There are changes being made, and those changes were announced in a blog post by Microsoft in end of November, I think it was. And they said, beginning January the 1st, 2025, a small percentage of cloud enterprise agreements in direct markets will no longer be eligible for renewal under the existing EA framework. So a small percentage, cloud enterprise agreements. It's not strictly a defined term, but really, it's an enterprise agreement without any on-premises products. It's just online services and Azure. Direct markets, like the UK, where you transact directly. So while they have made this change, it's only for a subset. People that I've spoken to, it's a few percent of overall EAs. It's indicative of a longer term path, but for now, there are some people who've seen it and gone, oh my God, there's no more enterprise agreements. That's not the case. What Microsoft have said for those who are impacted and part of their longer term roadmap, they will be looking for enterprise customers to move them to the MCAE, which is the Microsoft Customer Agreement for Enterprise. Microsoft call it the digital evolution of the traditional enterprise agreement. I disagree with that. Evolution suggests a continuation. This is more, to quote Alan Partridge, more of a revolution, not an evolution. Very, very different, the MCA to the EA. So as it stands, the differences between them, the MCAE doesn't have on-premises software, doesn't have software assurance, doesn't have tiered pricing. So with an enterprise agreement, you have level A, B, C, D. That doesn't exist on the MCAE. There are no step-ups or add-ons. There are no special amendments or custom terms. You can only buy in US dollars, and there's no price lock. So pretty much all the things that make an enterprise agreement good, not available on the MCAE. There are changes afoot. Not all of those things will still be on this list if I do this in 6 months or a year. But as it stands, those are the differences. It does add more granular billing for Azure. So what you will see, FinOps teams, FinOps practitioners, very excited about this move to MCAE because it makes their world easier. But as you can see, the column on the left makes a traditional asset management job much harder. So more granular billing. It's a digital agreement as well. So Microsoft see this as a positive. It's shorter, it's digital, kind of click through, yep, signed, no problem. Every asset manager, procurement professional, contracts professional that I've ever spoken to, that fills them with dread, really. This idea that there won't be a proper contract that is printed out, and sent for review, signed, kept in the filing cabinet. The fact it's digital, it concerns people. And then you can manage everything through the Microsoft Admin Center. So Microsoft's aim, and this harks back to that licensing simplification process that I mentioned earlier, Microsoft's aim is to streamline things as much as possible. There are some benefits for you as a customer. There are more benefits for Microsoft. Enterprise agreements are quite expensive to produce, quite time intensive, lots of people, forms, systems, etc. So trying to move that to a more low touch digital approach will save Microsoft time and money. So if you've had the notification from Microsoft that you're not eligible to renew your EA, then this is some of the stuff to think about, and feel free to give me a shout. Even if you haven't, if you're a level A customer, so sub 2,400, start thinking about this, what your approach would be, because that's where they're focusing at the moment. Larger organizations, level B and above, you're okay for now, but I think anything like this that gives an indication of where Microsoft or any software vendor, where they're trying to get to, it's never too early to consider your options and how you would manage something like that. So they are changing the EA, but not as drastically as LinkedIn might have you believe. And there is a lot of work to do, but as I say, some things are changing. So I know in a couple of months there will be some slight differences to this, but still, it's nowhere near as fully formed as the enterprise agreement. Another big change on the licensing side is pay-as-you-go and consumption billing. So this big focus for Microsoft, for many software vendors, but for Microsoft, they're really moving towards this. So products that have got a pay-as-you-go model, SQL Server on premises and Windows Server on-prem, you can do pay-as-you-go for both of those. when you enable there's a product called Azure Arc, which effectively connects your on-prem data center into Azure. It enables pay-as-you-go for SQL and Windows Server on premises. There are a variety of things to consider in that scenario. Some of the things, with Windows Server, for example, if you have pay-as-you-go and you delete the virtual machine on your server, it will still charge you. Unless you do a specific process to turn it off in Azure, someone deletes it on your physical on-premises server, it still bills you. So things like that to consider. Power Automate and Power Apps, which are part of the Power Platform, they've both got pay-as-you-go models. Copilot Studio, which was Power Virtual Agents, it's now Copilot Studio because, of course, Copilot has to be somewhere. That's got a pay-as-you-go model, and we'll touch on in a few slides some of the recent changes to make that pay-as-you-go model even more difficult to manage. Microsoft Syntex and SharePoint Agents both have pay-as-you-go elements. Microsoft Fabric, which is the Microsoft's latest and greatest data analytics offering. So you've got Power BI Pro, and then they had Power BI Premium per capacity, which sits in Azure. Power BI Premium capacity has been retired and is becoming Microsoft Fabric. I'm currently building out a training course around Microsoft Fabric, which is much longer than you would think it would be for one product. And finally, Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat also has pay-as-you-go option. And that's another element to the ever-growing, ever-confusing Copilot lineup. So lots of products, lots of things that you will be familiar with in general, and things that we'll touch on again throughout this session. So you can see, Microsoft's key products, pay-as-you-go is there. Now, pros and cons of pay-as-you-go. Microsoft say, reduced upfront cost. So let's take something like Power Apps, for example. Under the traditional model, you would estimate, right, 5,000 people, I think, will use this app, so we'll buy 5,000 licenses. Perfect. Microsoft say, with a pay-as-you-go model, you don't have to do that. You can ramp it up. So if it's 200 people at first, then 500, and then it grows over time. Pay-as-you-go allows you to ramp up through across the usage. And if you estimated 5,000, but it's only 3,000, you only pay for 3,000. So that's Microsoft. And again, other vendors are doing the same thing. That's their angle. Faster scalability. You don't have to wait for licenses to be approved and signed off and purchased and reserved and so on. You can just use it and you get the bill later. Don't worry about it. And overall, a chance of reduced wasted spend. Conversely, for me, the downsides, and probably the biggest one, is it's difficult to forecast. Anything that's on a pay-as-you-go, a consumption model, very difficult to forecast how much you're going to use. I was talking to someone the other day, and they were talking about Microsoft Dataverse, which is the underlying storage for Power Platform and a few other products as well. And they said it's not difficult to forecast. It's impossible. And I think that probably sums it up quite nicely. So it's very difficult to control. And I think there is potentially the chance of increasing the wasted spend, because you know what it's like within your organization. You think, right, 5,000 people will use this app. But then, someone tells someone else about it, or it gets shared on a Teams or a SharePoint or whatever it might be. And instead of 5,000 people, 9,000 people use it, or they at least open it and go, oh no, that looks rubbish. But now you have to pay for those 9,000, at least just for the first month. So there's an increased chance of waste in some regards. So my advice with pay as you go is, make sure that you understand from end to end how it works and how it will impact you. In some scenarios, it will absolutely save organizations money and reduce processes. In other scenarios, possibly within the same business, but with a different product set or a different team, it may well be too difficult to forecast. So, it's on a case by case basis. Make sure you evaluate pay as you go for you, and I think really consider that forecasting. Because currently at the minute with an enterprise agreement, most of the spend, you say, right, this agreement, we've got all these products, this is our bill of materials, it's going to cost us £8 million. And then over the course of the agreement, you might add some new licenses. Maybe you've got new starters, you might add a new product, but it's relatively controlled. The more pay-as-you-go billing that you have, then potentially your enterprise agreement is initially cheaper, but then it's a bit of a black box over the next 3 to 5 years of what you're going to end up spending on an annual basis. So really really do your due diligence on pay as you go. And an example of that is they recently introduced Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat, which is a pay as you go model. Now, this is different to Microsoft 365 Copilot, and this is different to Microsoft 365 Copilot BizChat, and it's different to the version of Microsoft 365 Copilot Chat that used to exist. It's now sort of evolved slightly, so a bit confusing. But this with Copilot Chat, the initial one is free. So this expands Copilot capabilities to users that do not have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license. It's free for what they call web-grounded answers, and then charges apply for what they call tenant-grounded answers. And basically, web-grounded, it gets the answer off the internet. Tenant-grounded, it gets the answer from internal information, so from SharePoint, for example. And you can see why that tenant grounded would be more useful for a business. So everything is done on messages, and this is done through if anyone has been using Copilot Studio, you'll be familiar with this idea of messages. And there are different types of answers, and different answers use different amounts of messages. And this is also highlights for asset managers, software licensing professionals. There are more and more new metrics appearing. It used to be server, processor, and we got to core, per device, per user. Now we're talking about messages. And with Copilot Chat, it's $0.01 per message. A classic answer, one message. A Gen AI answer, that counts as 2 messages. An autonomous action uses 25 messages, and a tenant grounded message is 30 messages. So this new Copilot Chat tenant grounded thing, each time that uses 30 messages. So you can already see here, not only is per message a metric, but now if you're trying to forecast usage, you need to be able to say, right, well, that's going to be a classic answer, that's going to be a Gen AI answer. And The way that it works, so the tenant graph ground in 30 messages, so that means that it is 30 cents per what Microsoft call a knowledge retrieval. So the bot going back and getting the answer from your internal systems. That is included within Microsoft 365 Copilot. So if you're paying for that additional add-on license, this capability is included for those users at no additional cost. If you're not paying for Copilot licenses, and this is something that you're looking at using, then an example, and this is taken from Microsoft. So you have an agent that someone has built, and it's using this tenant graph grounded capability. So they connect it into your systems, and employees can ask questions about sales data. So it could be, how many how many customer orders have we made in the Northwest in the last 6 months, or whatever it might be. And in this example, Microsoft have said that an average sort of conversation is 4 Gen AI answers and 4 tenant grounded answers. So remember, a Gen AI answer is 2 messages, graph grounded is 30 messages. And in this scenario, you've got 50 Copilot users and 100 other users who don't have a Copilot license. And I apologize, there's probably more maths than you were expecting at this time of night. So in this scenario, 4 Gen AI answers, that's 8 messages. 4 tenant messages, that's 120. So altogether, it's 128 messages that these 100 users are using. So that's a total of 12,800 messages at $0.01 per message. So $128 a day, which, for 100 users is quite a lot. And, if you're a small organization, then, maybe that over time is a significant part of your budget. Or if you're a larger organization, imagine if you had 1,000 users that were doing this, or 10,000 users, those prices really start to ramp up. So then you have to look at, do we continue to do it this way, or there will be a break-even point where it's cheaper to buy Microsoft 365 Copilot. So even if you don't necessarily want most of the functionality that gives you, it will be cheaper than using these tenant graph grounded agents and bots. And of course, Copilot, huge focus for Microsoft. They want more businesses to buy more Copilot licenses, and this may well drive people to do that. So something to think about, and go back within your business and try and find, right, within my organization, who is likely to be experimenting with this? Who is going to be building agents and bots that are pulling data from SharePoint and answering questions for our internal teams? Try and find them. I can almost guarantee they will not know about this, or they'll have seen an announcement from Microsoft that said $0.01 per message and thought, that's basically zero. I don't need to worry. And then you can kind of talk them through this example. So this one, kind of high up on the list of things to be aware of. Also, you see, I mentioned autonomous agents as well. And Microsoft have said, this is an agent. And you'll notice as well, they used to talk about bots. Now we talk about agents. As far as I can work out, they're basically the same thing. But I think agent sounds a little bit cooler. So that's the way that the industry is going. These autonomous agents, they understand the user's work. They act on their behalf, as the name suggests. And you can use them for automating processes. These are $0.25 per action. And again, you need to dig into the specifics of what an action is And when someone builds an agent and they build a process flow, how many actions are contained within that? Because that's not always straightforward. And the big thing with this is that autonomous agents are not included in Microsoft 365 Copilot. So there is a scenario where you're paying for the Microsoft 365 license and you're paying for Microsoft 365 Copilot on top. And then if users start using these autonomous agents, you'll be paying additionally on top of your add-on, which is on top of your base license. So again, as with the previous example, trying to work out who is likely to be trying to use these things and look at what guardrails can you put in place. Can block people from being able to do this? Can you find a way of cross-charging internally, etc. But this is the kind of the new world, particularly with Microsoft, but also Salesforce and so on as well. And there are plenty of other examples. I mentioned Dataverse earlier. Lots of scenarios with that where you pay for different types of storage and API calls and things which, as a traditional IT asset manager, we've never really had to think about, and things which are all very difficult to forecast. And that is where, it's a kind of a sweet spot, really. The understanding is lower and the ability to control costs is lower. So for the software publishers, revenues will be higher. And that's kind of where we're finding ourselves. So I'm conscious there's a lot of information here. A lot of it is kind of brand new information. But these are the kind of things to be thinking about. Potentially your upcoming Microsoft renewal may be relatively similar to the last one. But your next one, so if you're renewing this year, your 2028 renewal will look very different. There will be a lot of this, lots of pay-as-you-go, lots of agents, lots of unforecastable metrics, and so on. So I would start to think now about what it will look like, the renewal afterwards as well. I could talk for quite a long time just on this. Don't worry, I won't. But if you do have any questions, feel free to get in touch and happy to go through it. A couple of other changes that they've made. So I mentioned it around Microsoft Fabric and also from SA SKUs. So with Microsoft Fabric, this is the new data analytics platform. Power BI Premium capacity has been retired. So at your next renewal, if you haven't already moved to Fabric, you will have to swap over to Fabric. It kind of lines up with the existing SKUs, apart from the bits where it doesn't. Like I say, I'm working on this training presentation. I'm on about 55 slides now, just to explain Microsoft Fabric and how you generate spend. The licensing looks quite easy, then when you dig into it, it becomes very, very complex. With Fabric, it contributes towards your Mac. Some of you may be familiar with this. That is the Microsoft Azure Consumption Commitment Agreement, possibly the best named thing Microsoft have ever created. One of the few things where the name actually explains what it does. So if you have a Mac agreement and you've committed to a certain amount of Azure spend, if you're moving to Microsoft Fabric, that will contribute towards that number. So that's a side that we can talk about as well. Lower entry point, so it's easier to get started than it was with Power BI Premium. But Copilot for Fabric is only available from a certain point up. So those lower entry points, you can't use Copilot, which, depending how you look at it, could be a good thing. So Fabric, this will certainly be a topic of conversation at renewal if you're using Power BI. If you're using a competitive product from Salesforce or someone, they will certainly be looking at Fabric being on your next agreement. And they also announced the end of the From SA SKUs. So these, again, some of you have probably got these on your agreement. This was, what are we now? I was going to say 2015. I think the From SA SKU came out, and it was for the scenario where you're totally on-prem with software assurance. You want to move to the cloud, but you feel that you are being penalized because you're effectively rebuying in the cloud. So they made these From SA SKUs to give a discount to take into account that SA spend. You can still renew those SKUs, but you can't increase numbers anymore. So Microsoft's logic is everyone who was going to do this has done it by now, so they don't need them anymore. We'll see how that plays out in reality. If you're a Dynamics 365 customer, if you have Dynamics on-prem and you're still migrating to 365, there is what they call the Bridge to the Cloud 2 promo available, but as far as I can work out, it's only available direct with Microsoft through that MCAE. It is a 3-year non-cancelable, non-reducible term. So you're quite locked in. So consider whether that works for you or not. But again, you can see, there's a sort of a general, narrowing of what's available, sort of pulling the ladder up a little bit from some of the older things, moving everyone forwards into the cloud. So those are some of the licensing changes. By no means all of them. I picked the ones I think are the most impactful, and perhaps the ones that you may not have seen elsewhere. By all means, drop in the chat, message me on LinkedIn if you've got questions about this. If there's something that I didn't mention that you thought I would do, please, flag it up and we can dive into it one way or another. So that's the licensing piece, and then still roughly on time here. The strategy piece. This is, where are Microsoft going? What's in their head at the minute? Focus areas for 2025: AI. Anything AI. Yep, all over it, as every software vendor is. Agents. Like I say, you'll notice things that used to be bots, now they're agents. Lots of ideas about how AI agents can help you as a customer. Microsoft Azure. So if you're not using Azure, Microsoft will want to know why on earth not, and try and change that. If you're already using Azure, use more of it. If you're already using too much Azure, they will, to some degree, they will help you optimize it, but almost solely with the idea that you will then buy more later on. Marketplace is so in Azure there is a marketplace where you can buy third-party products: Sophos, McAfee, Fortinet, Citrix, SAP, and so on. Many of these now are eligible to count towards that MAC agreement that I mentioned. So Microsoft are working with these third-party vendors to encourage customers, rather than buying directly from the third party or from your reseller, through your traditional method, buy it through the Azure marketplace. You can still involve resellers through what they call private offers, but keeping it all within the Microsoft portal rather than you going outside, through your normal procurement methods. Big focus. It will have benefits for customers to some degree. It is a bit easier. It probably will be a bit cheaper. It does circumvent almost all of your procurement checks around, can we use this product? Are we paying the right price? Let's check the audit terms, penalties for non-compliance and so on. So some organizations can completely put the brakes on marketplace. Others have gone full steam ahead. I think for most people, it's somewhere in the middle. But do be aware, if you're in asset management or procurement, marketplace is happening, and Microsoft are encouraging people to buy through that, which may well be, going outside of your current channels. Anything on the security side for Microsoft, big focus. The idea of Microsoft security products used to be a literal joke, sort of 15, 20 years ago. That it was now apparently, if Microsoft sold their security division, it would be the biggest security company in the world. So lots of focus from Microsoft, lots of spend. That means that they want lots of customers to buy it. So that will certainly be a point of conversation. Dynamics 365, a huge portfolio now. It's always expanding. So if you're a current Dynamics 365 customer, there's always something else you can buy. If you're a Salesforce customer or whoever, Microsoft, really want to win those competitive bids. So you can use some of that to your advantage. If you're not happy with Salesforce, if Dynamics would suit your needs, take advantage of that. Say to Microsoft, look, we're looking to move, but you're going to have to make it worth our while. We need business investment funds, we need proof of concept, we need X, Y, and Z. So any of these focus areas, if they are also your focus areas, then use that to your advantage with Microsoft. And the same, finally for Microsoft Fabric, big focus on that. If that is where you want to go, that there are certainly things you can do to benefit from Microsoft's focus, shall we say. One of the other big changes with the kind of strategy side, changes that they've made to the partner ecosystem. So many of you will be familiar, LSPs, licensed solution providers, the big resellers, you work with them on your enterprise agreement, and then Microsoft give them rebates for selling certain products, certain quantities, for the size of the agreement, etc. From the start of this year, they have slashed those rebates really significantly, enough that it's making a material difference to how much money some of these partner organizations can earn. So that indicates, Microsoft are looking at taking things direct. So if they're taking more direct, why would they pay as much as their partners? But the money in many respects is still there. It's just driving different behavior. So rather than, they transact the agreement, they get some money. A lot of it is driven through customer workshops now. So if a partner, if they get you to take a co-pilot workshop, they'll get X amount of rebate. If you then do a follow-on, there's some more rebate. Lots of money on security workshops in particular. So you'll see a change in your partners. Certain things that used to be free, services that were included, maybe they're not available anymore, or maybe they're not as keen to do them, and you will see an increase in workshops and trying to drive you to do certain things like that. So that's quite a big change for the partner ecosystem. I was a reseller many years ago, and it is a big part of that world. So be aware of that when you're working with a partner, when you're working with Microsoft. That's a fundamental change, and something that when at Seniega, when we're working with people to help them with their renewals, this is absolutely something to factor in. And then there are a couple of product retirements as well. So they had a product called Azure SQL Edge, which was, it was a small containerized version of SQL that sat on the edge of the network and reduced processing in the cloud. That's being retired end of this year, September this year, sorry. Viva Goals, which was Microsoft's product for OKR management, that's been retired in December this year. And then Azure Spring Apps, which were developed in conjunction with VMware. Some of them are going end of life next month, others in 2028. But if they're on your agreement or they're on your roadmap, they're going. So bear that in mind. On the Azure side, products and services are always coming and going, but it is something to bear in mind for renewal. So lots and lots of information in there. This is, it's not the first time I've delivered this presentation, but even at the end of it, I'm still like, oh wow, there is a lot in there. So appreciate that you've heard a lot. In terms of next steps, then I would say, assess your current position. What was your last renewal? Where are you now? What's your future roadmap? Do the same thing for Microsoft. Based on this information and other information, where are they going? And then how do you line up with that? Where do you follow the same path? Where do you and Microsoft, go in different directions and use that to inform your renewal and build various scenarios? And again, I could go into all kinds of detail around the different models and building out BATNAs and ZOPAs and all sorts of things. But you build those scenarios, you brief your exec team, and then get started ASAP. However long it is to your agreement, it's already, you should already have started. We're working with people kind of 18 months out. That's a perfect time. But that, 18 months goes quickly. So if you're, 6 to 12 months, absolutely, you need to be driving that forwards. And then, on a more sort of personal level, next steps, you can get in touch with me. Happy to talk through any of this with you in more detail. We've got a renewal readiness assessment that you can do for Microsoft on the Synerga site. And also, I'm launching a range of new training courses, education courses. So if you're interested in that, let me know. Those would all be great next steps for keeping up to date on this. I've got some QR codes there if you're interested. Like I said, if any of us somehow are not connected on LinkedIn, that's LinkedIn there. But just search for Rich Gibbons and you shall find me. So yeah, I mean, I could go on, but I won't. I appreciate everyone's time. Hope it's been useful and interesting, and I look forward to seeing you on a future webinar or at the in-person BCS events and catch up over a coffee as well.
Fantastic. Thank you very much for that, Rich. So that's the end of your presentation. An awful lot of information in there. Some maybe not as much good news as people were hoping for, but some really useful insights. And it's good to know where they're going. So as you say, so you can match it with where you're going and see what advantages and weaknesses there might be there. But there are still a couple of people had to drop off during the presentation, unfortunately. But there's still the opportunity for anybody to ask questions. If you want to type them into the chat, if it turns out there's a lot of questions, we could maybe even open this up more for a direct session if people want to ask their questions. But so let's see if we're getting anything coming in.
Yeah, don't be shy. Although, like I say, I'm aware usually at the end of this session, everyone's just like, ooh, and then, tomorrow it clicks and you're like, oh, actually, I have got some questions. Bamboozled by fabric. Yep. Yeah, I know how you feel. There's there's some real. So with fabric, one of the examples, and this is again a Microsoft example. If you move a terabyte of data in one way, it will cost 20 cents. If you do it in a different way, it will cost $13, which is a huge difference. So yeah, and it's just pages and pages of that kind of thing. So much more difficult to manage than anything else before. But it gives us all something to do.
Okay, thanks for that question, Charlotte. And we've got another question from Stuart.
Do they make it so complicated on purpose? I mean, it says it might be rhetorical, but we'll give it an answer anyway. I think I don't. t- I don't think they do, and I think this goes for all publishers that I think it's generally done with the best intentions, where they try to cover so many different scenarios. Um, but then I do think there comes a point where they should kind of look at it and say, right, actually, that's not working. Let's try again. But they never do that bit. So I think, yeah, the complexity never hurts them, any software publisher. So I think I don't know whether they do it on purpose, but they don't not do it on purpose. I think that triple negative made sense. Um, but yeah, it's a good question.
And also, as you were saying earlier, they're trying to encourage people to go for the big bundles. They want people to buy E5 licenses. The it's to their advantage to make people go, isn't there an easier way of doing this? Yes, spend more money.
Yeah, just buy all of it. Um, yeah. And yeah, only good news is they didn't go Broadcom on us. That's true. Broadcom set a very kind of like a high watermark for every other software publisher. I think, yeah, there's probably a lot of them that can go, well, at least we didn't do a Broadcom. Um, have any government customers been transferred to MC? Not that I'm aware of. Most things with Microsoft, government customers get left and until the end because they are a bit more complex, or it's a bigger entity. So I think even when select contracts were phased out for MPSA, government, I think there are still some active government select contracts now. So I've not seen any government customers go across to MCAE. I would be surprised if any did in the foreseeable future. Um, but that's a good question. Yeah, I think it's just corporate for now.
Okay, thanks, Randy.